Welcome to the Great Old Ones channel. Here I'll talk about tabletop role-playing games and some other subjects related to gaming from time to time. Speaking of time, today's subject is time. Yes, there really was such a thing. Did some digging backwards in some books to find out where the first concepts of campaign time had come through, and it was there from the early beginnings, 1974. The Dungeons and Dragons, the Wilderness Campaigns supplement that came out with the original 3 books, on page 36, mentions sometimes there were some suggestions where a dungeon expedition equals 1 week, a wilderness adventure equals 1 move equals 1 day. Including that was the 1 week of actual time equals 1 week of game time. Here's your first reference for 1-to-1 time. Also mentioned there, the time for dungeon adventures considers only preparations and a typical 1-day descent into the pits. Another quote out of that book. Time for wilderness expeditions would include days of rest and recuperation. And lastly, actual time would not be counted off for players, quote-unquote, out on wilderness adventure, but would be for those sequestered in their dens, hidey holes, keeps, castles, etc., as well as for those in the throes of some expedition in the underworld. Right, so those characters who were not, quote-unquote, participating in the adventures weren't counted as part of it or anything like this, and it was suggested that you had to keep records and separate all of this stuff out. That's about as where they left it. Now, in the Dungeon Master's Guide from 1979 for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, he goes in a little more depth on it, offering some extra insight into this particular thing. The main quote I take out of this, and it's the heart, I think, of it right here, and we can leave it at that if you want. You cannot have a meaningful campaign if strict time records are not kept. Now, add on to that, though, we can go into where he mentions 1-to-1 time. A quote out of that particular section of the book is, and it is best to use 1 actual day equals 1 game day when no play is happening. I think part of the suggestion here was it was assumed that you might possibly have multiple groups running in the same dungeon, and keeping accurate records of time lets you know which monsters had been cleaned out of which rooms at what time, who got to the treasures first, which players were available at which particular adventures and things like this, and kept the headaches down to a minimum of keeping track of these sorts of things. If all your gaming groups ran through the same adventure concurrently on the same timeline. Another quote out of this is, being aware of time differences between groups of player characters will enable you to prevent big problems. This is exactly what he means right there. Big problems are all of the random disparity stuff that would pop into there and cause a game master headaches and arguments amongst players and stuff as well. And another big long quote out of this particular section of Dungeon Master's Guide, which I particularly like. You may also ask, no, misquote him here there. You may ask why time is so important if it causes such difficulties with record keeping, dictates who can or cannot go adventuring during a game session, and disperses player characters to the 4 winds by its strictures. Well, as initially pointed out, it is necessary penalty imposed upon characters for certain activities. Beyond that, it also gives players yet another interesting set of choices and consequences. The latter tends to bring more true-to-life quality to the game, as some characters will use precious time to the utmost advantage, some will treat it lightly, and some will be constantly wasting it to their complete detriment. Time is yet another facet which helps to separate the superior players from the lesser ones. If timekeeping is a must from a penalty standpoint, it is also an interesting addition from the standpoint of running a campaign. You get more immersion, you get more depth and more fun and satisfaction out of your campaign when you use rules similar to this. I'm not saying that you have to use 1-to-1 time, but you keep good, accurate records of time and things like this, and it seems that your players will react to it better, get a little meaning to it, because in the real world, that's how they're interacting with their environment there. Why not continue this into your fantasy environment so that it feels more real to them, they can get more enjoyment out of it that way. I do something similar with my games. Now, I don't have them all running through the same dungeons on the same timeline, I've got multiple groups that are running, and they're all running in their own little sandbox so that they don't interfere with one another. So my main problem with upkeep of my game at that point in time is remembering which group is on which timeline and which pad. But they're all getting the same things, and they go in different directions, and when it's fantastic, that's fine. They're having some fun and enjoying it, but I'm keeping track of the time and things like this from the relationship of something that they can get reference to. It seems more real to them in that way. They have some sort of meaning. They're looking for particular clues to the adventures and stuff that they're running on, and they're all running on a timeline with the time clipping and things like this, so that add some tension to the game and stuff too by keeping accurate records of time. I don't necessarily have to do the one-to-one time where the week that they're gone is a week that happens, because normally these campaigns they're running steadily through and will end an adventure day in the middle of a dungeon, say, when they stop for a rest period or something of that sort of thing. Not necessarily to have to run back to town to find shelter and stuff and hole up for the week. Suspend the time at that particular time. These are just suggestions from rules books that went out that really, to quote another pretty fun film, these are more guidelines as opposed to real rules. Follow them if you like, follow them if you don't. But the time suggestions, the one-to-one time, really was a real thing, and it really was written in the rules. Whether or not the original author followed those sorts of things is totally irrelevant. It was there as a suggestion for new game masters to use and take advantage of the wisdom that he had come across running his own games. Thanks a lot for joining me on this little talk. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. If you have any further suggestions for future episodes or that you would like me to come up with, topics that you would like to see for me to review, just leave a comment below. Love to see all these sorts of things. I love to interact with other people and get their suggestions and their ideas. I'd love to hear about your time ideas and stuff as far as dungeons go. Thanks again.